Councilors, please take your seats. I'd like to call to order the August 9th, 2018 meeting of the Barnstable Town Council. Please note that tonight's meeting is recorded and broadcast on Channel 18, and that in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, I must inquire whether anyone is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. Seeing none, please silence your devices. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call?
Councilors Biedenbender.
Here.
Crocker.
Here.
Cullum.
Here.
Dagwan. Flores.
Here.
Rapgrassetti.
Present.
Hebert.
Present.
Levesque.
Here.
Neary.
Here.
Schnepp. Steinhilber.
Here.
Tinsley.
Here.
Wallace.
Here.
12.
Thank you very much. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay. In the interests of everyone's time, we have some procedural things we're going to do on item 015 under new business and item 009 under old business. And the process with the adult marijuana really started back in March, and through all the different hearings of the planning board and our last meeting and all the discussion that we've been able, to have in these meetings, the council's worked pretty hard to come to a point where we can have a good discussion starting point to actually get something done, which is why item 015 has been brought forward. So with that said, Vice President Crocker, could you please read item 2019-015 and refer to a joint public hearing with the Planning Board on August 16th, please?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. Referred to a joint hearing with the Planning Board on August 16th, 2018. 2019.015, amendment to Chapter 240, the zoning ordinance to add regulations for establishing, operating, registering recreational marijuana cultivators, research facilities, independent testing laboratories, and prohibiting all other non-medical marijuana establishments.
All those in favor of referring item 2019-015 to a joint hearing with the Planning Board on August 16th, 2018? And that is unanimous. Vice President Crocker, could you please give me a motion to withdraw item 2019-009 under old business?
Yes, Mr. President. 2019-009, as written, I would rise to withdraw it at this time.
Second.
A second. All those in favor of withdrawing item 2019-009? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the Vice Chair of the Planning Board for coming for that procedure. We'll see you next week. Now we're going to go back into public comment. So any members of the public wish to speak, please come forward. And please state your name and limit your time to 3 minutes.
Peter Halesworth, 30 Commerce Road, Barnstable. Good evening, councilors. We appeared before you on April 26th and July 26th to offer an opportunity to our town council to join Bush Point residents in Precinct 1 to work together for a great success story to address the massive flooding of our neighborhood. Achieving our goal of flood resistance would grow the town's tax base give us peace of mind, and provide the community a living lesson about effective collaboration between citizens and government. At the meeting, we were promised a game plan. While thus far we appreciate the visits and the attention of town officials, since April 26th, we've been eagerly awaiting the game plan. That's the bottom line. Residents and voters in our neighborhood dread the prospect that town infrastructure will once again be unprepared and fail this winter. Investments in property, flood repairs, construction activity, and jobs are stalled by this uncertainty due to the lack of a game plan. For sale signs in our neighborhood are popping up. Unfortunately, time is not our friend. This is an emergency situation. More than 3 valuable months have passed, now going on 4 months without a game plan. I direct your attention to the photographs I've circulated to you. This is the town infrastructure that stands between more than 200 residential lots of family in Blish Point from winter storm flooding in our neighborhood, with an assessed property value of more than $160 million and a market value above $200 million. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words. I'll speak just a couple of hundred to avoid the risk of getting gonged for speaking too long. But a few words come to mind looking at these photos. Neglect, disrepair, inadequate. Respond, replace, help, serve. From the start, our goal has been to make flood resistance in our neighborhood a success story with cooperation from all levels of government. At state level, elected officials get the urgency. An FY19 state budget amendment to allocate not less than $50,000 for Blish Point improvements, thanks to State Rep Will Crocker. These funds await a town game plan. An amendment to the Mass Environmental Bond Bill for $1.3 million, thanks to State Senator Julian Sear. This needs a game plan. In addition of a $300,000 appropriation for drainage and culvert improvements to Blish Point, thanks to State Rep Tim Whalen, with passage of the House Economic Development Bond Bill. This needs a town game plan. Our final words of appeal.
Got about 30 seconds.
Get aggressive now. Time is not on our side. Write a plan now to repair the culverts and stop the flooding. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Any councilor response to public comment? Councilor Flores?
Just in response to what Peter has mentioned, we have met a couple of times, Dan Santos, myself, Mark Gels, and a few folks in the neighborhood. There has been some activity, some action that has occurred. Can more happen? Absolutely. The monies that you've mentioned, I'm not sure if they've actually been released by the bond bill. I know they were in there, but I don't know if the monies are available. I'd have to ask my town manager if he has received any of that funding. Okay, so that's an issue. The money is supposedly earmarked, but until it's released, it doesn't do us any good. But the more important issue is that I, as your town council in Precinct 1, hear you loud and clear. I've met with a number of different folks. We need to move this forward with a game plan to make sure that come the winter, that we don't have the same kind of problem that we've had in the past. So I will be moving aggressively forward with the town manager and the director of the DPW to be sure we do that.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the town manager to come up and update us too, because this is something that's very active. I mean, it's something we talk about on a weekly basis. Been a number of meetings. I know the DPW has done a ton of work out there too, so I'll have him update us.
Good evening, Mark Ellis, Town Manager. As stated at the last council meeting in response to the concerns of the citizens in the area, we are actively working on this. It is a certainly well-known and documented problem in this area. For decades, we have had to respond during storm surges, and as we look at resiliency of our coastline, we know that in the future, perhaps, this may not just be a storm surge scenario. This may also be something more permanent. So mindful of that, as well as what they experienced this spring with storm events, we're going out there and looking at the existing drainage systems. I shouldn't say we're looking at it. We have looked at it. As we said last meeting, we have retained a professional engineer to work with us on the design and the permitting to try to come up with a solution for this. The next step will be to put together a plan, get it permitted, come before you for either acceptance of some outside funding source or ask for your consideration of a local funding source. Concurrent with this, not just in this area but throughout the town, we are running simulations on where these challenges exceed just simply improving drainage, this being one of them. Our residents, and certainly we need to be understanding of it, but quite honestly, we are. Our residents need to be understanding of it. Certainly our leadership needs to be understanding of it. So when we go forward with long-term solutions, it addresses the needs to the extent that it is physically possible to address them. So we'll continue to work with the residents. We are working. We're not wondering what the plan is. I've told you, we're looking at the drainage structures. They're in design, next step permitting, ultimately construction. And we'll continue to communicate on our progress with that. And I can do it weekly to the leadership so that they can share it back through the council to the residents. We can do it regularly with the neighborhood, and we'll continue to do so until all parties are satisfied. Or that we've gone as far as we can with this solution, quite honestly.
And Mark, the DPW has cleaned out all the existing drainage system?
Yes,
Is that
they
correct?
have.
Okay. And also, just so everyone knows, the Lieutenant Governor was down here a few weeks ago. Met with myself and the town manager, assistant town manager, representative from State Senator Sears' office was there, and Representative Hunt was in attendance. And this came up, and we talked about it in detail and urged her to help release those funds as soon as possible. So we're taking it up, to the highest channels that we possibly can to get money moving and get a solution in place. So
Absolutely. Safe access, egress, safety first, second, certainly, but not far behind, is protection of our assets in our community, both public and private. And so we're moving on this, and I suppose the next hurdle will be, and I know we'll have their support as we work through the regulatory side of this, to have both public and private support behind moving expeditiously through whatever the proposed construction solutions might be.
And Mark, one other thing is, I would assume this is going to involve some state permitting,
Oh, absolutely. Maybe federal.
federal as well.
I'll let you know when we see what the extent of the improvements to the assets are.
Right. Okay.
Drainage, and it's going to have to go beyond drainage to address storm surge. So we're going to have to look at what that means and what can be designed to help mitigate that.
All right, appreciate the update. I know it's on the front burner because we've been talking about it
Absolutely.
constantly. Councilor Flores?
Thank you, Mark. We'll be monitoring it closely to make sure there is that kind of follow-up. And I would also add, there is a private citizen who has come forward who has indicated he is willing, as I've shared with you and I will share with the council, willing to seed this project with a donation of $50,000 to the town. Speaking of the budget, and this is in response to Peter, know that a bond bill is just really a wish list that's put together by state legislators. It doesn't matter until that money gets released. The only money that's really active right now is the $50,000 budget amendment that Representative Will Crocker filed for the FY19 budget. The bond bill monies you never sure you're going to get. politicians use it and elected officials use it as wish list, and it gets listed as part of a whole, but then it's up to the administration to release monies or portions thereof. So it's not a guarantee that that's going to come our way, just so you're aware of that.
My communications are regular with our legislative body, and I know that this issue is on, it's a front burner issue. They're all supportive of moving forward to assist in this neighborhood. So hopefully, I think you were very accurate in your description, but hopefully this will be authorized and it'll help us to move this more quickly.
Great, thanks, Mark. Councilor Hebert?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark. I think in order, is it the state or the federal government that's helping us with resiliency planning? Or nobody?
I'd have to go back and look at the various grants that we've gotten. Most of them are through, most federal programs come through state agencies.
Okay,
So sometimes it's I'd have to go back and look those specifically.
okay. And so the other thing that I think we all have to understand that we're not just talking about one area in our town that's at risk. Many areas in our town are at risk of damage from storm surge of any type. It came on us sooner than anybody expected that we would be seeing this kind of storm damage to our area. If there's funding that is necessary to push this forward from some kind of emergency source within the town, I believe that this council is supportive of you using those emergency funds to make that happen. I can't speak for the council, but certainly I wouldn't want to delay. And is there a possibility that if we pre-spend the funds, is there a concern that once the funds come out, we can't use pre-spent funds for this project? It's not a concern. I don't think it's a concern.
But I don't know that it's been designated by the governor or some higher authority as an emergency. So I believe that any funding we would get from outside wouldn't be deemed emergency. It would be deemed as a capital funding from some potential source.
Okay.
We could certainly appropriate locally. I don't believe from a procurement or a borrowing or, well, cash is obviously a more local decision, but that emergency would necessarily apply at this point. But that doesn't mean we don't move through the normal timelines. Certainly what the residents are sharing with us is real. This happened. Right. The drainage out there is an old drainage system that can be better. The road elevations are low, and if we do it appropriately, can help to have better access egress. So that's where we're going. And then concurrent with that, we're also looking at what happens when we have a rise in the general water level through a storm surge or other. And what will be the implications there? Because really that'll be a different long-term solution than just looking at the roads and the drainage. But we're gonna move, and we're gonna move quickly, and we're gonna work with our residents and certainly the council and all available outside sources to get this done.
Thank you, Mark.
Councilor Flores?
One final point. Mark, could you be sure, as you meet with the engineer, the outside engineer that we've hired to help obviously create a plan, I think the residents as well as the council as a whole needs to see that plan. You know, what
Absolutely.
What it's going to cost, what the timetable is, what the indicators of success are by a specific date, so that I, in turn, as the council of Precinct 1, can legitimately sit down with the folks who live in the Millway area and say, this is the game plan, this is what it is that we're doing by such and such a date, these are the expected improvements that will occur, so that there is that level of confidence, if you will, as we move this all forward.
I'll talk with Director Santos and have something next week in a preliminary form.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other councilors? Councilor Neary?
Mark, I just have a question, kind of as a point of record. As to technicality, like, who owns the culverts? Or that area over there? Is that owned by the town? Is that a mandate to take care of by the town?
Public roads and the drainage structures associated with public roads are typically town
So is Commerce a public road?
It
Is
is.
Sunset a public road? They're not
I'd
private
have to
roads?
look on the side roads, but I know Commerce is.
Okay, I mean, the
Sunset is a public road? Yeah, Sunset is as well.
Thank you.
But we would look at all of that. In this event, we could probably look collectively at the system. The surrounding lands, I would have to go in and look at who has jurisdiction and who has ownership, so.
Anyone else? All right, we're gonna move into town manager communications, so you're in the right spot.
Okay. Well then, I've given you my town manager communication for the period of July 20th through August 9th. We are proceeding with the tasks in the budget action calendar for 2020 is scheduled, and I've attached it. The Town Council Strategic Plan Workshop is scheduled in September, and a joint meeting workshop with the school committee to review the financial condition of the town is planned for October 4th. So those are two of the initial steps that are critical to us preparing certainly a successful budget for 2020. We continue working with the Mass Department of Fish and Wildlife, USGS, Department of Environmental Protection, Water Supply staff regarding future potential water supply wells proposed for the 250-acre parcel northeast of the Hyannis water system. The USGS has completed preliminary modeling runs. They've done 7 of them, 7 different scenarios in the area of the Hyannis Ponds complex, and we are and are currently reviewing internally at USGS. Water samples have been water sampling has been completed in the test wells on the fish and wildlife land, with the exception of one particular contaminant. The perchlorate, PFAS, and dioxin results are in as either no detect for perchlorate and dioxin, and the same except for one well for PFAS, and that detection was below any standard, but it was there. So that kind of indicates how prevalent this particular contaminant is out there in the environment. Unfortunately, that was not a surprise to anybody. We were actually glad that we didn't find it in more locations. As I've said before many times, PFAS, I actually saw an ad on TV talking about a frying pan that contained no PFOA. So this issue is rising. This wasn't a local ad either. So this is a national issue where the products we use every day contain these chemicals. We wash them down the sink, they get into the environment, and now given the detection levels we're looking at these, we're finding them from people throwing away wrappers from hamburgers, washing clothes with flame retardant chemicals in them, washing pans in many cases, depending on the sort of non-stick pan you're using. That's not regulated. So the concentrations in those items aren't regulated. You can put it on you, you can cook with it, you can wrap your food in it, but once it gets into the water supply, that's when it is regulated. So I think it's very important that education becomes a major part in moving forward with managing emerging contaminants, because this is just the beginning. Most of the time, this isn't even sampled for either in many public water supplies. So it's out there, and it's certainly something that needs to be considered. We did find iron and manganese levels, high levels in these wells. That's not a surprise either. That's naturally occurring. We can treat for that and remove it. So that's certainly an additional treatment that may be required, but not something that would prevent us continuing our efforts. The last round of samples that we haven't done are for heavy oil type contaminants. We're still waiting for that to come in. It just hasn't come in yet. So as soon as I get that final result, I'll know better whether there's anything significant that might say to us, let's stop. At this point, we do not see that. So we will continue our efforts. We continue our discussions with Vineyard Wind relative to their proposal to construct transmission facilities that would interconnect with the proposed offshore wind farm in federal waters. I met with Vineyard Wind twice last week, and we are in the final stages of developing a host agreement with Barnstable. We have another meeting on Monday. It's all progressing well so far. I hope to bring forward a resolve to the council authorizing the town manager to sign into a host agreement in the near future. There may also be land-related authorizations that we'll have to bring before council, depending on the route that they choose and whether there's some sort of not Article 97 or other related authorizations that the town would need to provide so that they could route their cable across various lands. I'll let you know as soon as we know better whether that's something that will be required. On July 12th, I met with Open Cape to discuss their plans for high-speed internet service. I reported this at our last meeting. Open Cape made a request and the request has been included in the most recent economic development bill to receive funding for high-speed internet on Main Street and North Street in Hyannis. Much as Councilor Flores explained for us, this is an earmark. It has been approved, so at this point it needs to be released by the governor. It doesn't have to be released. So if it is released, then they would be able to proceed with hanging high-speed internet on Main Street and North Street. They say they can have it done in a quarter or 3 or 4 months. So that would be a nice addition to our downtown if they were able to do that. The recycling market continues to change relevant to our solid waste management. The lack of a market to dispose of single-stream recyclables has made it necessary to resume source separation of our recyclables, meaning right now everybody got to go to our transfer station who participated, took their recyclables all commingled all together, plastics and cans and glass and paper, and were able to throw them away. That market no longer exists. In fact, some of the items on that list that I just went through, though they're all still identified by state regulation as recyclable, so therefore we're not supposed to throw them into our waste stream that isn't recycled. Recyclable means you can reuse these things for something else. It's not linked to cost, it's linked to that you can use them for something else. So that's certainly a challenge we all have to take into consideration as we move forward. But the single stream, there's no longer a market, and we don't see an end to that for single stream. So you're going to see immediate changes. You've already seen them at the transfer station of us asking you to separate out tin cans. We're looking at whether we're going to do that with newsprint. So the tin cans happen. Newsprint, because there is still a market for newsprint, even though it isn't what the single stream market was 2 years ago, meaning it still costs, but it costs less to recycle. And then we're going to go look at maybe alternatives for glass in a reuse scenario. We're going to continue to chip away with this. We're going to try to do it so it's not confusing to our customer, and we're going to try to do it so that we educate our customer. I was at the transfer station on Saturday, and I was throwing away some plastics, and I got into a 20-minute conversation with a customer who didn't know anything about this. And when I got done, she actually spent the time with me and talked, and she had no idea because I wasn't, up in front of anybody. She just thought I was another Barnstable resident, which I am. And so she said, well, I'm going to go home and talk with my husband, and we're going to check in to see if this is accurate. But what grabbed me about it was that she had no idea, and I'm guessing that of our 9,000 customers, most of them have no idea. And a real confusing communication that we have that we're going to think about and make recommendations to you, we're going to try to do it in the next 45 days, is when we give a sticker for recycling and the recycling focus is still on single stream, that sends a bad message when there's no market for single stream. In fact, we're paying almost $110 a ton to get rid of this stuff, and I really don't know where it goes, because there's no market for it, while we're paying under $60 a ton for regular trash. So I think what we're going to have to do is separate out the things that there's a market for. I've already called Boston and the region, had this conversation, I'm waiting for an answer, on whether DEP is going to say, hey, when they're really, you can call it recycling, but if it can't be recycled, then what should we do for those specific products, like many of the plastics? Glass is also a challenge, but there's kind of reuse options. They're not less expensive, but I'm guessing this will probably be fairly limited if they give us a a little window here to start looking at some of these products differently. Big thing is to educate our public. We're also going to put in place a waste stream reduction program, because I think we're already looked to try to reduce our waste stream. A lot of that can be through education. As much as we've spent the last 30 years educating our public on, I mean, I was having a conversation, and I'm guilty if I don't, I feel guilty if I don't recycle. I feel like I'm doing something wrong, because for the last 30 years, that's been ingrained in me. So that's hard to reverse at this point. Paul, you're laughing over there, but it's true. I am doing something wrong. So I think we need to also have people think about the products they buy and why they buy them and how they're packaged, and is there a way to at least think about that as a consumer and try to minimize the cost of the waste that we create. That's all. You know, it's an optional program, but it's something that I think is certainly worth doing. So we're going to be working on that as well. I've been asked to give an update on the dog park project. It is progressing. There was a very long lull. We were having problems with the contractor getting on site and doing the work. They have been actively working since we've communicated with them on the necessity for them to continue to work. At this point, we're hoping to be done by October, this fall, October 2018. And we'll keep you advised as we progress. Finally, my second favorite day here in Barnstable, because my first favorite day is when I get to speak with all of the lifeguards at the lifeguard orientation day before we start the season. I tell them all that there's such a wonderful representation of our community out there face to face with our visitors, our residents, and doing it in such a wonderful manner. And I'm very proud of each and every one of them. Tomorrow is the 44th annual Cape Cod Life-Saving Competition here in Barnstable. We are hosting it at Craigville Beach this year. So that's very exciting, 9:45 tomorrow morning. There's going to be 10 teams, I think 9 from the Cape and 1 from Maine. 150 lifeguards compete in a surf and non-surf category competitions. It'll be going on all day. Now, we will be keeping Craigville Beach open. We're going to open the parking lot across the street. And so we're inviting all to come, but know that there's going to be a lifeguard competition. There's going to be people swimming. There's going to be people paddleboarding. There's going to be people running. So it's going to be a little bit different than your normal day at the beach, but everyone's welcome, and we will keep the beach open. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councilor questions? Councilor Rapgrassetti?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark, for the report. Have there been discussions with Dennis with regard to their hopes to have a regional glass depot?
Yes.
So we'd pay some kind of tipping fee to
Yes.
send our glass there, which would certainly weigh less or make our waste stream weigh less. I know Councilor Hebert was concerned about the weight of all those wine bottles. So that's good that that's ongoing. That's all I had.
We're looking at any and all options.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hebert?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark. So I was just at Eastham, the seashore, this afternoon, and it had the big sign up, and it said 38 billion single-use water bottles in the United States on an annual basis. 17 million barrels of oil used to make that. Only 20% are recycled. We lost in our effort to get a deposit on those. And my vehicle that I drove here tonight has got a minimum of 1,000 of those bottles that we'll properly recycle in the morning. So when you speak so clearly that we need to think about what we're doing. So one of the things is to reduce. So if you have a refillable water bottle, you're doing a positive thing for the environment, but also for your pocketbook and also for your own lifestyle. So I am asking for your help. I am going to be pushing for legislation, but your voice is much stronger than mine in this. Wine bottles are being refilled in California, and it's saving the consumer money, and it's saving the environment. And so I'm going to be pushing for that, working with the Board of Health for sanitation purposes, but to introduce into Massachusetts refillable, so it's kind of quaint, but you go into your liquor store, your retail store, and they have a big wine barrels, white and red and rosé, and you bring your bottles back and you fill it, and you get a discount. That's great. And for those who choose not to use that, then I'm looking for an end-of-use fee, so that the town of Barnstable is not paying $110 per ton to get rid of wine bottles. There should be some reciprocity there. And you're right on when you say that we need to reduce and to reuse and look at our packaging. So I would ask you to also ask the governor's office to work with us and the Commonwealth to look at anything that we can use recyclable materials for to make an economic advantage to us, so that it makes a greater value to our recyclables, but also we create more manufacturing out of that. We used to have a whole study center in the Commonwealth, and it was closed down to see how we could best use recyclable materials. So thanks, and again, I will work with you on any of these projects. Thank you.
Any other counselors? Counselor Cullum?
Just for point of levity, there's really nothing more embarrassing than being a wine rep and recycling the wine bottles that you taste people on all week long. I know there's 3 sympathetic hearts in the room at least, Phil Wallace, and I see Spencer Knowles out there who's done it. And so just for point of reference, when I show up at the dump with 30,000 wine bottles, it's not because I drank it the night before. And then also, I'd like to say that when you go to a retail store, you also have a lot of other medium that you can buy the wine in. They now are coming in cardboard, which is much easier to recycle, and also there's aluminum cans, and so there's a whole host. Thank you.
Counselor Tinsley?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. This is actually not on the list, but we received an email today that West Nile virus was found in Barnstable. And we got some really good information with that email on, protecting yourself and your property. Is there a way we can get that information into the paper, out to our public, or is that already in place? Because that's obviously kind of scary.
Thank you for asking that question, and it's what I was hoping to close with. And I was going to ask Lynn Poyant to come up and share with you any current information, and certainly in sharing it publicly, I would ask Lynn to coordinate those communications as she does on all of our issues for certainly the municipal government. Thank you.
Lynn Poyant, Community Services Director. Thank you for the question. When you receive it, that's because it's gone out as a media release to our media contacts. And when we send it out to our media contacts, it also includes all the civic associations, the chambers of commerce, and a wide variety of folks. It's really interesting that since we posted it onto the town's Facebook page, there's been over 155 shares as of 7 p.m. tonight. And one of them was actually a Brazilian, one of our Brazilian contacts, which we also have on our media list. And the town of Barnstable is not the only one. When the Cape Cod Mosquito Control Project does this testing, it's for Barnstable County, so there were mosquitoes found in Falmouth, Dennisbourne, and Yarmouth, as well as Barnstable. And one of the things that we were asked to do is, today rained, and there were some areas where it rained really hard, and so you have standing water. And that's an area where things can collect, so they want to make sure that people address the standing water in their homes, in their yards. Make sure that your screens are repaired so that you don't have mosquitoes coming into your homes. Be aware of peak mosquito hours, the hours from dawn to dusk. Clothing, it's been really hot, but if you can wear protective clothing, that works great. And then applying insect repellent with DEET. One of the things that caught me off guard, I suppose, because I'm now over 50, it said that while West Nile virus can infect people of all ages, people over the age of 50 are at higher risk for severe infection. So it was definitely something that was on my radar when I did it. So when we put the information out, we try to get it out as many places as possible. Facebook seems to be the fastest way to get it out, and it will be in e-news tomorrow as well.
Councilor Rappacetti? Lynn, you might have a question here.
Lynn, just as a follow-up, the Cape Cod Times reported that the 3 spots in the town of Barnstable were Hyannis, Marston's Mills, and Katuitt.
Yes.
And I think the constituency would like, a little more detailed information. And I know you probably don't have that right now.
I
but
don't have it right now. I did make the request already, and
Okay.
as soon as I get it, I will share it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Lynn. Mark, I just wanted a quick follow-up on the recyclables. You want to go first? All right. Just also to educate the public, I think you're right. I think if you polled people, probably 8 to 9 people out of 10 don't realize what goes on with the recyclables after they put them in the bin. And it's not just an isolated issue here. It's something that goes on all over the country. More times than not, that just ends up in the trash anyway, especially the plastics and the glass. That's just a fact. So do you, and we're talking about taxpayer dollars here, as we're paying to get rid of trash or recyclables, which are twice the cost. Do you anticipate, you mentioned 45 days, do you anticipate by October that we're at least temporarily only going to accept metal and cardboard while these other solutions kind of get worked out?
What we're going to do is try to identify which recyclable products have, and I've already started the discussions on this, have markets so that we have somewhere to take them. What we're concerned about on those that don't have markets is that they go to a vendor who disposes of the material for us the same way that they dispose of the MSW, yet we're paying $110 a ton rather than 57. Now, the regulators will look at that to try to prevent that, and if it goes to a waste-to-energy facility or other facilities, they're only allowed a percentage of recyclables in the waste stream. But when there is nowhere to take it, they can stockpile it for a certain amount of time, which I think they've done. I think they're at the point where the communications to us are, we don't know what we're going to do because we can't take much more of this because we have nowhere to put it. So within that realm, so the answer is yes, but I'd prefer to have DEP say there are specific products that we understand that this is going to happen, therefore you're not going to be penalized if we find it in the waste stream. That going back to what Councilor Hebert said, many of those products, it would be better if we could educate our public. We make decisions to reduce the waste stream, therefore we don't have to worry as much. It'll probably always be there. That would be very helpful as well. So this is going to have to be a coordinated effort. We have to watch the market. We've seen these highs and lows in the recycling market before, and I think you weren't incorrect that depending on how heavily it's regulated, will dictate perhaps where it may go, because many times it's the dollar that drives those decisions. So, yeah, we're going to work actively on this to make sure that we are providing our residents the best service we can, maximize recycling, reduce the waste stream as best we can, but not be misled that it's being called recycling when it's not, and paying that difference.
Right, it's a stark reality we just need to be knowing about and deal with properly. Vice President Crocker?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark, for the presentation. I guess I'll stick first with the recycling, just so that maybe we can just keep hearing this thing home till we have some direction for it. The product becomes a commodity because people will pay for it. So we are trying to identify the people who will pay for it because they recycle and reuse it. We have abused the term recyclable and made it interacting with a separated group of materials that we want to believe are recyclable, but they're not necessarily, there's not always a market for it, as I understand it. So what happens is when we concentrate them in a bin, we put a percentage that's higher than the $55 a ton people like, and so it makes it more difficult to get rid of it, and we have to pay considerably more. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah.
When it goes out and it's been separated.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing with it for $110 a ton.
Yes, nobody does. No.
I don't.
Yeah, other than charging us more. But what we're trying to do, though, is clearly keep this, the pass to the landfill to be completely free. Is that our goal as well at DPW and for our town?
I think we can for those things that are recyclable. And sometimes it isn't just that they pay, sometimes is that, you know, you avoid the cost of what trash costs to get rid of too.
Yeah.
So if it's less, then that makes sense as well, because you're avoiding cost. But that's not the case right now.
Right.
It's
but
almost double.
There's a chicken and an egg game or a shell game going on, that if we don't get to just the items that actually have a market, that we are actually spending more money to dispose of it than if it was going into the stream in a normal fashion, if I may say so.
Yes.
And what we're trying to fight is to always deliver that pass into the landfill to be free.
Yes, we want to,
So-
yes.
So
want
we
to keep
will be making
recyclables.
changes of
We
what
have to
can
make
take
changes, or else
because
we could
can't
not do
make it
that.
free.
Correct.
Okay. So
But I also think that I want to know at that, because some will argue to continue to do the recycling for the reason I said, that, you know, we're trained to recycle. But if it's not truly being
Yeah, if it's
recycled,
not a product that can be
then
used,
that's
it's
very
not really-
misleading.
Yes,
And-
it's
and
a label that we abuse.
That has not been the first time we have had those concerns during down markets. So we just have to watch this. Doesn't mean it goes away forever. It means it goes away until there's a market to get rid of the materials.
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. On the water issue with the Mass Department of Fish and Wildlife, we've been waiting for these tests for quite some time. I'm grateful that you pushed it with your own horsepower to make sure we got the samples and got the tests out. But now I'm worried about how soon we get back to the table now that we've had what we consider fairly good news from the draws we've had up there.
I think it'll be in
Do you-
September. I think collectively we'll be back together. We're just waiting for USGS
Yeah.
to review their modeling, and then I think there'll be a broader discussion.
Yes, there was an all-star team at the table last time,
Yes.
but they weren't really speedsters.
Right.
They were good, and there were people we needed at the table to have the discussions with us, but they also took us a little bit beyond where we had to be. First, we needed the quality of the water
Yeah.
to talk about our reality of getting there. So I appreciate all they've done in preparation, but now with the quality of water, that preparation should hopefully pick up the pace for us.
But
So-
I was encouraged to see that they've run their 7 scenarios based on different pumping, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
Now we gotta wait for them to do QAQC on their modeling and make sure that they're comfortable with what they've done and they haven't made any errors. And then I think we'll all be together, and I've stayed personally involved, I will continue to, so I can accurately report to you how we're progressing.
Yeah, thank you, because some of that usually comes in parallel with the second phase of the permit, but they chose to bring some of it ahead, so that maybe will expedite things for us, so that's what we're hoping for. Last thing, we've got a lot of time, your time, negotiating with Vineyard Wind. Do you have an idea of a timetable for which they would like to have completed the host agreement? I mean, is there something
Yesterday,
tied to it?
I think that they are actively in their permitting process. I think that the difference between us coming to agreement and them being in, it's not really a dispute, but certainly not in agreement,
Yes.
will weigh on the timeliness of that process for them. It's been a very collegial relationship. They are forthcoming with information. I really think they're just trying to refine, at this point, their physical assets, what those will translate to in tax dollars, and then the various pieces of the host agreement that they need to put in place to satisfy our concerns. I'd say we're 90% of the way there, and between conversations, direct conversations, and we've made our town assessor and finance director directly available to them, and they've taken us up on that. I think they can get those questions answered and then address those conditions of the host agreement in the next 30 days.
When we started this process, we could have arrived at something with them without feeling the pressure of their bigger permit up the line. But the bigger permit up the line now may be dragging to a head, which will bring us to a head as well. Is that how I understand where we are?
Yes.
Thank you. Nice job. Thank you.
Councilor Hebert?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mark, thank you for bearing with me, but could we get the figure on the estimated how many tons of commingled we are?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yes, but but what we're now paying $110 for, I think the public hears that. They have no idea what a ton looks like of commingled, which it doesn't take much for any community to come up with a ton. So I'm looking for that bigger number so that we can say to the public, if we don't get this under control, this is how many hundreds of thousands of dollars we're looking at if we don't get this under control. So I think that would be an important thing to get.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes, okay, and I think that's one of the points we have to drive home, as Councilor Crocker was saying, because people just don't get that reality. So anybody out there who doesn't know who I am, I operate the largest redemption center on all of Cape Cod. We're dealing with millions of pieces. It's important to know that an aluminum can is back on the shelf that we process in 60 to 90 days. I'm keeping the cost of your next beer or your next soda in a can down because we're recycling 100%. An aluminum truck goes out with just aluminum. Same with the plastics, whether it's Polar or Pepsi or Coke, that plastic is reshredded and processed and used again. Saves on the environment, saves on our carbon footprint, but also economically, it's the right thing to do. So when we went to commingling, we, as a town, 3 to 4 years ago, with ABC promising us zero cost for that, I knew that there was the end of the golden path that was coming at us because it was enticing. But what we did is we destroyed the market so that China said they didn't want any more of our crap. We can commingle, but it's hard and expensive to separate. And when we don't do a good job of that, places like China, who used to buy our stuff, say they don't want it anymore. So I'm going to ask us to follow the money and put the pressure on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the leadership, MIT. We have a lot of geniuses up there. We can come up with better uses of all of these products and turn them back into our advantage. So I'm going to say follow the money. When we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, there's a lot of good reasons why grants could be given to students. Come up with a solution. They just came up with a solution for the rings that go around cans. They have one that's practically made out of dirt and mud that's totally 100% degradable. Thank you very much. So I just hope we follow the money and make it work for us. Thank you.
Councilor Flores?
Thank you, Mr. President. Most folks know that I'm running for state senator, so I am at virtually every town dump, i.e. transfer station, on Saturday morning. I go up and down Cape Cod, usually standing out there and greeting people and trying to let them know who I am. And as I watch the recycling procedures, if you will, or processes, and I've been to probably 9 dumps over the past few months, everyone does it a little bit differently. My question is whether we're separating white glass from brown glass from green glass. Is there a process or a procedure where collectively, if we as Cape Cod versus individual towns pooled our resources collectively together, would we have a better or a bigger market in terms of saving us money relative to doing it independent of each other?
I think there's always value in looking at that collaboration, especially when you go to market. You can, at a minimum, you might get better pricing. We've done that with our bordering communities in the past. We had a long-time relationship with Yarmouth, and we'll continue to look at that regionally. We do it in coordination with the Cape Cod Commission. They can certainly assist us on these issues. I think going into the single stream, when there was a strong market for single stream, was a cost-effective way to get rid of recyclables. But now that that's changed, retraining our customer, retooling our facilities to be able to separate those things that are marketable just doesn't happen overnight. And I think the next step in the disposal chain here, those people we have contracts with, because this is a national issue, this isn't just happening with certainly us or our contractor, they're not tooled any longer for the separation. We did that for many years. We separated. The cleaner our product, the more money we got. It was that simple. But the single stream became so cost-effective that decisions were made to go to that. And, you know, in retrospect, it probably wasn't a bad decision in the short to medium. Long term, cyclical trends in markets change.
I think most people recycle, I know I do, but when I go to the transfer station on a weekly basis and I see folks who are throwing material into the regular trash receptacles and you can hear the glasses breaking as they're dropping in, how does that impact that aspect of what it is that we're eventually sending out when we're mixing recyclable material with trash and it's going into our dumpsters? Does that ever get rejected? Is there a problem with that? Is that we penalized in any way?
It could be rejected depending on if it's a banned item or if it's a percentage of a listed recyclable under the regulation. I think it's 20%. If they're inspecting, I don't know where the ultimate disposal destination is for the municipal solid waste. Could be a landfill, could be an incinerator, it could be other. So again, market drives the private sector relevant to cost, relevant to availability. So difficult to answer, but no, we've never been rejected. We've never, as far as I know, and I ran solid waste. We've never even had a scare to be rejected. So I'm sure, though, we've had situations where we've found that people mistakenly put a tremendous amount, for example, of just corrugated in our MSW stream. That's a problem. You can't come in with a full load of corrugated to a location and expect they're going to take it to dispose of it when everybody knows there's a market for it. That won't fly. If it's contaminated with an oil or something of that nature, and they smell it or they see it, that sort of load could be very easily rejected. The stuff we're talking about are the plastics the plastic bottles, the wrappers, the containers that your strawberries come in, all of milk jugs, all of that stuff. There's no market for that right now.
Well, just one final comment that, seeing the guys on a regular basis on Saturday mornings, they do a heck of a job, really monitoring where things go. So hats off to the DPW guys who are working up at the transfer station in Barnstable. They do a heck of a job.
Thank you. They do. They work very hard.
Absolutely. Any other counselors? No? Vice President Crocker?
Just so you know, our poor manager doesn't get a day off. I want to read you my Sunday tweet to him, or it's probably not a tweet, I guess, right? No. Way over my pay grade. FYI, no need to respond. CBS News Sunday morning just did a big piece about certain plastics that are no longer able. Oh boy, there we go. That are no longer saleable or valuable recycles, and how towns are informing their people that they can no longer recycle that brand of plastic. Enjoy your weekend.
That's
I
right.
probably didn't help you enjoy your weekend, but it just shows you it's everyone's problem, not just ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We'll have you back at the end for the
Thank you.
presentation. Vice President Crocker, could we act on the minutes of July 19th, please?
Yes, Mr. President. In our packets tonight, Town Council meeting July 19th minutes as drafted.
I have a second. All those in favor of approving the Town Council meeting minutes of July 19th,
Point of
2018?
information.
Go ahead.
There needs to be a correction on the second page. It's under the public comment period. It says Lewis Kane. It's actually Louise Kane, female. Thank you.
Do you have that, Madam Clerk? Okay. So I have the second. So all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of July 19th, 2018 as amended? And that is unanimous. All right, moving on to council communications. Anyone have any correspondence or announcements? Council Biedenbender?
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that this week is Centerville Old Home Week. Centerville Old Home Week was started in 1904 when they wanted to welcome Centerville's sons and daughters back, many of whom had gone off to Boston to earn a living, and started our first commuting generation. And 90 years went by till the next home week, and Roy Richardson, former town councilor here, he reinstated it. So this year is the 114th anniversary, and it's been going on all week. And I just wanted to mention that tomorrow there's going to be an art show at Chip's house all during the day, and then in the evening at 6:30 there's going to be a wonderful African drumming presentation by Tara Murphy and her crew at Chip's house. It's a lot of fun to sit on the lawn and watch. And then on Saturday during the day, there's going to be the annual yard sale at Centerville Historical. And then at night, of course, at 7 p.m. on Craigville Beach is the big bonfire that everybody loves. And during the and around that time too, the fire department is doing a demonstration for the kids, which they all love. So thank you. Oh, and the music. Sorry, there's music. 7 p.m. There's a musical performance as well at this community room in the Centerville Public Library. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Anyone else? Councilor Levesque?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a congratulations and continued cheering for the Barnstable Little League 10U baseball team. They are currently in Cranston, Rhode Island, battling in the New England regionals for Little League National. They have, up to this point in pool play, the first 4 games, they've scored 38 runs and have allowed 5. And tomorrow they play for the New England championship, and if they win that game, then they play the Mid-Atlantic champion, and that includes Maryland, the D.C. area, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. So it's a big deal. And this isn't the Little League World Series. Those are 12-year-olds. So this group would have to repeat that when they're 12 years old. But it is a very unique thing, and it's a big deal. So kudos to Stone Johnson, Brandon Gomes, Steve Hoxie, and David Murphy, who are the coaches of that team, and they've really put a lot of time and effort in those boys who have been playing together since June, actually middle of May. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Yeah, they're on quite the run. I've been getting the email updates. Councilor Wallace?
Thank you. Let's see, Saturday, August 18th is the West Barnstable Village Day festivities, and this is a real good time, and activities are loved by all. Once again, I'll be at the dunk tank, so here's your opportunity.
Where is that again?
Yeah, the dunk tank, Saturday, August 18th. Yes, and running concurrently with that is the Art at the Farm. And there's a lot of music going down at the farm. So from 1 to 3 p.m. we got Toast and Jam. But earlier on there's Graham Hampstead from 10:30 to noon. So there's a lot of performing arts as well as visual arts that'll be there. And we'd like to see everyone down there for a real good time. So thanks, and I'll be looking forward to the dunk tank.
Thank you. Councilor Flores?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. On August 22nd, which is a Wednesday from 4:30 to 6:30, the Barnstable Village Association will be sponsoring their annual Barnstable Summer Stroll. It's when basically all of the business community comes collectively together to offer different kinds of sales and other kinds of opportunities, free foods, free ice cream, usually at Smitty's, if you sing Sweet Caroline. So it's usually a fun kind of event. And it finishes up with a public concert on the lawn of the old jail from 6 to 7:30. Pam Pryor, whom probably many of you have heard in the past, will be performing that evening. So Wednesday, August 22nd, if you happen to be on the north side and want to come visit, it's a fun time. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Hebert?
Just as a note, meetinghousefarm.org, I believe, is running a contest on use of recyclables to make sculptures. And so if anyone's interested in that, they could go to the website, meetinghousefarm.org, I believe. But it's all the contest regulations and guidelines there. Thank you.
We'll let them know that we have a place where we can't get rid of this stuff, so they want to come grab it. Anyone else? All right. We are going to move into the orders of the day. Under old business, Councilor Rapcarsetti, could you please read item 2019-011, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Item 2019-011. This may be acted upon. Appointments to a board or committee or commission. Resolved, the town council appoints the following individuals to a multiple-member board, committee, or commission. Golf Committee, Keith Hochstein from Centerville is a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/2021. Ron Matros Katuitt as a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/2021. Housing Committee, Catherine Ritchie from Marston's Mills is an alternate member to a term expiring 6/30/2021. And Community Preservation Committee, James Tenaglia as a Recreation Commission representative member to a term expiring 6/30/2019 as written.
I have a second. This is item 2019-011, appointments to a board, committee, or commission. All those in favor of this item? And that is unanimous, and take note, Councilor Cullum has left the dais. Councilor Rapcarsetti, could you please read item 2019-012, please?
Yes, this also may be acted upon. 2019-012, reappointments to a board, committee, or commission. Resolved, town council reappoints following individuals to a multiple-member board, committee, or commission. Land Acquisition and Preservation Committee, Ann Rowland is a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/2021. Phyllis Miller is a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/21. F.P. Tom Lee is a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/2021. And Ann Kennedy is a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/2021. For the Youth Commission, Matthew McCauley is a student member, term expiring 6/30/2019. Sean Dowling, term expiring 6/30/2019. Ethan Searhall is a student member to a term expiring 6/30/2019. And Connor Levesque is a student member to a term expiring 6/30/2019. Aliana DeBarros is a student member to a term expiring 6/30/2019. And Lieutenant Jean Ishalis as an adult advisory member to a term expiring 6/30/2019.
Second.
As read.
I have a second. This is item 2019-012, reappointments to a board, committee, or commission. All those in favor of this item? And that is unanimous, and please note Councilor Cullum has returned.
If I may, I just wanted to thank everybody that put their name in for reappointment and for new appointment to a board or committee or commission, and also that the newly formed Infrastructure and Energy Committee is accepting applications for membership. And I was pleased to see Mr. Peter Doyle has submitted an application for that board. So we are having an appointments committee meeting on Tuesday, so if you'd like to put your name in, it's not too late. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to new business. Councilor Neary, could you please read item 2019-013?
Yes, Mr. President, this is new business which may be acted upon. It's item number 2019-013, acceptance of a fiscal year 2018 traffic enforcement grant award in the amount of $11,972 from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, Office of Grant and Research, Highway Safety Division, as written.
I have a second. I want to welcome Chief Sonneman. Good to see you.
Good evening, Mr. President, Vice President, members of the Town Council, citizens of the Town of Barnstable. My name is Matthew Sonneman. I'm the Chief of Police for the Town of Barnstable. And I'm here to talk about item number 2019-013, an acceptance of a fiscal year 2018 traffic enforcement grant in the amount of $11,972. Quick background, the department has been awarded a grant in the amount of $11,972. Of this total grant award, $6,572 is dedicated to specifically themed mobilizations in addition to directed enforcement at the discretion of the department. And $5,400 is dedicated towards the purchase of traffic safety-related equipment. This grant helps to raise the awareness of both traffic safety challenges involving drinking and driving, as well as the importance of seatbelt usage and distracted driving. The grant detail, the $6,572 are directed activities are such things as occupant protection, like seatbelt safety, impaired driving, distracted driving, such as texting while driving and things like that. Those are the types of mobilizations that would be done. As far as the equipment, the traffic division is purchasing a drone for the use to assist with reconstructions. In the past, we'd have to close roads down while the reconstruction went out there and measured and taped things off, but now they can do all that, and the drone can go above, take a picture to scale, and then just put it in the computer instead of having to close the road down for a number of time. There are also some other equipments, like a drag sled and some other things that help with the assistance of the reconstruction and performing for those accidents that are more serious in nature. The fiscal impact of this is that there is no required match, so it is not a negative grant. And that is about it. And if there are any questions on this?
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from the council? Do I have a motion to move the question? I have a second? All those in favor of moving the question? And that's unanimous. This is item 2019-013. All those in favor of this item? And that is unanimous. And Chief, you can continue on. Let's see, Councilor Biedenbender, could you please read item 2019-014, please?
Thank you. This is new business and may be acted upon. This is item number 2019-014, acceptance of fiscal year 2017 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, JAG, in the amount of $57,360 from the U.S. Department of Justice.
I have a second. Go ahead.
Okay. This is item number 2019-014, the Edward Byrne Memorial Grant for 2017. The Barnstable Police Department applied for and was awarded federal fiscal year 2017 Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant local solicitation from the United States Department of Justice in the amount of $57,360. The grant has been determined to be a disparate certification allocation to be distributed among 3 towns as outlined below based on prescribed grant formula for each town, and the Town of Barnstable Police Department will act as grant administrator and fiscal agent for all towns. The 3 towns that participate in this program are Town of Barnstable, obviously, and we administer the grant, the Falmouth Police Department, and the Yarmouth Police Department. Our portion of this grant is $28,694, which we are using to purchase a digital fingerprint scanner for the Records Department for processing of firearms licenses and other licenses that they do on a daily basis. We also are using, initially it was for defrayment of some of the costs with the Community Service Officer Program, but this grant was delayed somewhat due to some activity at the federal level involving sanctuary cities type stuff, so it got delayed. In the interim, while we were waiting for the money to get released and come back to us, we found other funding sources for the community service officers. So what we did is we're going to be applying for a grant modification, and we are intent on redoing, getting a private contractor to redo our website to improve communications with the public, and then we're going to use a portion of it is for foot and mountain bike patrols within the communities and various different activities like that. There is no matching required for this grant either. There is no negative fiscal impact for it.
Great, thank you. Any council questions, comments? Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Chief. Just a quick question. Is this grant categorical or is it competitive? Do you compete? When you apply, is the money automatically allocated by area district, which would be categorical, versus are we competing against other communities, other towns to get this? I'm just curious.
Not to my knowledge, but they do base the amount that you get based on crime rates and stuff. So for instance, this money here in this year for 2017, we got the amount of $28,694. Right now we're in the process of applying for the 2018 grant, and for that year, the amount went down by about $1,000 based on our crime rate dropping a little bit.
Thank you.
Any other councilors? All those in favor of moving the question? And that's unanimous. This is item 2019-014. All those in favor of this item? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much, Chief.
Good evening. Have a nice evening.
Have a good night. All right, that ends the orders of the day, but we're going to finish the meeting up with a presentation from the town manager on the municipal dredge program.
Where do we go with that, you know?
Good evening. Mark Ells, Town Manager. Oh, I left my clicker over there. Dan, can you grab that and bring it my way? Thank you, sir. I'm here tonight to give you an overview of our municipal dredge program. I'll be doing the bulk of the presentation, but here with me is Rob Steen, Assistant Director of Public Works, Dan Horn, Director of Marine and Environmental Affairs, Mark Milne, Director of Finance, to assist me as we discuss the respective areas. Ruth's also here if we have any legal-related aspects of this. And I'm going to try to go through a presentation that really talks about the technical and permitting components. We've done this already for you in a sense back last September of 2017, but I want to give you an update. And it really leads into the discussion that we need to be in now as we move both into projects and FY 2020 and beyond, and then close with the two current action items that I believe we need to proceed with so that we can productively move forward with this program. So the goals and the objectives of our comprehensive dredge program to develop a plan, a comprehensive plan to effectively and efficiently manage our town waterways. Do it proactively, long-term, and town-wide. We want to get our comprehensive permitting in place, and we want to create a long-term funding plan. And you'll see as we move through it, it can be very different scenarios based on the type of funding that may present itself to us prior to or concurrent with us doing a project. And I think the first phase of the Katuitt Dredge project at the cut in Katuitt is a good example of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The project itself actually is town-wide. We've looked at Barnstable Harbor, we've looked at Lewis Bay, we've looked at Central River East Bay, we've looked at 3 bays and some of the upper reaches of 3 bays to understand what our embayment system is, what can be looked at as a maintenance dredge program or a needed dredge program in areas where perhaps we don't have some history of dredging, and then to put together a comprehensive master plan of how we're going to go forward with managing this asset. So the focus areas are those boxes you see up on the map, and certainly in the folder. I handed out a blue folder to everybody with this PowerPoint presentation as well as some attachments. So to go through quickly the methodology, again, DPW has already shared this information with you, divided into 3 categories. And this is important because I think the first category is simplest, second a little more complex, third more difficult as far as moving forward in a timely manner or under a provable permit scenario. It gets more complicated. So category 1, sites that historically yield sandy sediment. Category 2, sites that historically yield fine-grained silty sediment. And then finally, category 3, sites where historic documentation is not clear. So we could be into more difficult soils or sediments. We could be into types of uses that create complications with some of those silts and soils that may hold those contaminants and create some challenges for us as far as what we might do with that dredge material once we remove it. In the first category, we're really looking to pull the sand out, move it over to an identified disposal area, mostly beach replenishment, and drop it there again and utilize it as beach. And fortunately for us, in general, and then specific to the project that we have pending before us this year, the Katuitt Cut, we can use our county dredge, and we've actually got that scheduled, so that's something that we can utilize. It's cost effective, and it allows us to basically move sand from one spot to a point that's been approved for beach replenishment. And the county dredge versus contracted dredging, really we're finding that the place that we want to look at contracting or even in-house dredging for ourselves is in those areas that aren't the typical sand where they've already got assets in place. Those are cost-effective assets, and we can jump on utilizing those. And we have plenty of that, quite honestly, out there. When we did the Reach in East Bay, we found that those materials, though they didn't contain concerning contaminants, they were very silty and tight materials, and it wasn't just a matter of taking that material out and putting it back on a beach. So, in that case, we would contract, or if we had enough of those lined up year after year, we might look at purchasing our own dredge and doing that type of work. And certainly we can share that evaluation at a future date with you if you want to get into the details of when that's cost effective and it isn't. And then certainly disposal costs are a huge issue. It's one of the most difficult things that we permit. Dredging is one of the most difficult things that we permit. Quite honestly, there are multiple agencies involved, and we need to put those all on a timeline, receive all appropriate approvals, and then move forward within a very limited environmental window to do dredging projects. So it's an extremely complicated process. Established reoccurring intervals for each site. So you've got historic records and local knowledge, dependent on conditions, what sort of sediment type, currents, exposure, storm impacts, identified disposal options for sediments in categories 2 and 3. So in category 1, that's the easiest one. Those are the ones we can permit most quickly and move most quickly on. But basically taking sand out of a channel, putting it back on a beach. 2 and 3 get more complicated, more difficult to permit, both in the removal of the material, storage of material, dewatering of the material, and ultimate disposal of the material. Also gets more costly. And whether we can use the county dredge or not will depend on what the material consists of. Establish priority of each of the dredge sites based on local knowledge, MEA staff, waterways, certainly discussing it with our community, and then also looking at where the most pressing needs are. If we see that, shoaling is occurring in major channels, if we see that there are concerns from not just a navigation standpoint, but perhaps from an environmental standpoint of creating unsafe boating, swimming, or water quality conditions, we may want to move forward with a site over another. Certainly, though, one of the things to keep in mind as we move forward with this program is we're going to see opportunities, whether it be financial or whether it be windows to get out there and do this work because of conditions, whether they be environmental conditions like species that live there, or whether they be soil conditions or sediment conditions that exist. So sometimes you may see that we want to shift things around to accommodate what will allow us to accomplish this overall master plan in the most expeditious manner. So point is, it might change depending on what we find as we move forward. So it'll be always updated and reflective of that. Establish potential costs per site based on the assumed volumes. And so we've done all this. We've begun to look at what those volumes might be, what that estimated cost, given whether it's category 1, 2, or 3. And we've laid all those out over, is it a 20 or a 30-year period, Rob?
The plan goes forever.
It goes for 10-year permits. I think I had a spreadsheet with at least 20 years laid out in front of me when I looked at it. And we're estimating costs as of today. And we can base those on historic costs and what we know the county dredge may be or what contracted service may be. And we are going to include evaluation for those categories 2 and 3 of if we decided to compare it to in-house and would we save because of this ongoing program. Our bays don't go away, the channels in those bays don't go away, and the majority of them need to be dredged at some point. So we have 17 sites in category 1, 10 in category 2, and 4 in category 3. We're looking at moving about 40,000 cubic yards of material annually. We're estimating a cost of about $1.5 million. And we do know at this point, given the condition of these channels, that we have about a 10-year backlog already. Now, obviously, $15 million and the permitting and the ability to try to accomplish that in a short time frame would be a challenge. So we're looking at doing between $1 and $2 million a year worth of dredge and chipping away at this, trying to catch up where we can. At this point, we don't have this type of program. We don't have a regular ongoing maintenance program for all of those embayment systems and the channels within them. So it's not surprising that we have a backlog, and we need to try to move expeditiously, certainly during the early years. Town funding to date includes both cash and debt finance projects. That doesn't mean that we didn't get grants or other funding from over time, but specifically what this is saying to us is we've already gone out and started to do dredge projects. Sometimes it's been cash, sometimes it's been borrowed. We have borrowed money. We pay back on dredge projects, and typically they can go out about 15 years in the borrow, as I understand it. We're paying back out of our fixed cost operating budget to debt service about $500,000, a little under $500,000 a year for projects we've already done. So we have to take that into consideration, that we've borrowed this money, and that's already an active part of our operating budget annually, that we're paying that back. Now, that'll expire, and when that expires, we would be able to have greater capacity potentially for another capital project, potentially a dredge project. Depends on the priorities that we set and the policies that we may move forward with as we discuss this. So again, it's about a $1.5 million program a year, so that we can begin to get ourselves back to the point where we are maintaining these the system in our embayments that keeps them usable by boats, that keeps them safe, that keeps them flushing, certainly to assist with some of the challenges we have with nutrient load, to assist in keeping healthy resources in those systems, such as shellfish and finfish and others. So that's all part of what we're looking at here. Some more quantifiable than others, but certainly all part of what we're trying to achieve with this program. Now, moving from, so that's what DPW's been doing in its master planning and its maintenance dredging program, and we're ready to go. So we brought in the Cotuit. We actually accelerated the Cotuit project, which is a 3-phase project, about $3 million to do the 3 phases. We brought in $1 million, and I'll get to that pending order. That's one of the last items I speak about. And we have the permits. We've been through a legal process, but county dredge is scheduled, ready to go, and as soon as we're ready to appropriate those funds, DPW would be looking to move that project as soon as October 15th, I believe. The permitting window allows them to begin. I don't know when that closes. We can certainly ask Rob Steen if he knows that off the top of his head to address it. One way to fund this is Capital Trust Fund. You're all familiar with the Capital Trust Fund. Those are tax dollars, fees, et cetera, that come in. And then annually we look at how we allocate our Capital Trust Fund to those priority capital projects that we have within our community. You all know that we do 25 million plus or minus a year, and we've got about a $250 million backlog in the next 10 years of capital projects. So we're not necessarily we have greater demands from our capital assets than we do necessarily revenues to offset those demands. So we need to be mindful of that when we look to use the Capital Trust Fund. We have to make sure that it's focused on our priorities. We begin, and Mark Milne back last September went through the various options for funding, and many of them exist. So I'm going to try to give you a quick look at those and the types of revenues we currently see from them. And I'm going to make a suggestion at the end to you. So we have boat ramps and review of those fees. Expand on other ramps perhaps, or expand 2 other ramps perhaps, meaning the fees to other ramps. And we bring in about $35,000 a year. Now, that's just not money that isn't allocated. That's allocated to our operating budget and some to our capital reserve, because that's part of those general funds that come in with our tax dollars and our fees and other revenues. So that's already allocated, but that's the dollar amount that we currently bring in that area. And Dan Horn and Mark Milne can help me if we want to get into details about any and all of these categories. Moorings, expand / or reconfigure our fields. That's an ongoing discussion with Dan Horn. Review those fees, and right now we're bringing in about $241,000 a year. Dock leases, we could look to renegotiate those leases. Current revenue is about $20,000 a year. A more innovative thought is beach permits and parking fees paid for beach renourishment. So where we're seeing right now we separate the dollars. We really don't look that, if we take dredge material and put it on a beach that needs replenishment, that beach and that cost associated with the beach would have had to pay for that material. Therefore, money should go back to a dredge program to offset the cost of dredging. So we can begin to look at that, and we can begin to say, well, should we be recovering the cost of beach replenishment at the beaches? And certainly when a dredge project replenishes it, should some of that money that comes from that beach replenishment go toward the dredging program? And very specifically start to compartmentalize this and think about how we're going to get to that $1.5 million a year. Shellfish permits, again, certainly it helps to look at those programs. Certainly dredging can, and I've included a handout in there in your folder that talks in general terms about flushing, improving water quality, and certainly habitat improvement to keep the bays flushing and healthier. It's not easily quantified, but certainly there is a known relationship. Current revenues generated by shellfish permits are $160,000. You could look for an increase. So if we did a $5 increase either in the last or the next, you can see the sort of impact it would have to be put toward operations, to be not just dredge, could be put toward whether it's beach permit and parking fees, or whether it's shellfish, it could be put toward those programs, or it can be put toward other, dredge being one or the other. But we just wanted to give you a feeling for what the impact of a change to those fees might be. Another interesting area that Mark had identified is embarkation fees. It would be restricted to Hyannis Harbor. Perhaps looking at additional revenue. Currently, we charge 50 cents per ticket, and we bring in about $175,000 a year. Boat excise tax is another potential. Current tax is $10 per thousand with a maximum of $500. Current revenue we bring in is about $130,000. We could discuss lifting the moratorium on piers and docks. Now, there are also environmental ramifications to installing more piers and docks. There's also opportunities there, perhaps, if we were innovative in thinking about how we might incorporate shellfish into those structures. But it's kind of we're having ongoing discussions about the opportunity to do that with scientists and regulators. But if we just stick with the simple thought of, okay, more piers and docks, we do take in tax dollars because those assets, those private assets, get assessed. We have about almost 800 residential docks and about 40 commercial docks, and they fall into 3 categories: heavy, average, light. That determination is made by our assessing department. You can see, on average, the assessment for a heavy dock versus an average dock versus a light dock, and then the corresponding taxes recovered or assessed from a heavy, average, or light dock. So perhaps a consideration could be made if there were more piers and docks installed, that revenue could be dedicated to a dredge program to help create channels and more navigable channels in our embayment systems that would allow for better use. Waterways fees, potentially assessed on all vessels using waterways, could be added to mooring, slip, launch fees, or some other measure. Some exemptions may apply there, and Dan Horn would have to help me out because the state certainly has its has regulations relevant to what we can and can't charge for many of the different fees related to use of our waterways. So there may be limitations there. Boat fuel tax, a similar fuel tax charge for roadways could be considered. One of actually the town council in its request to the legislature, Acts of 2018, Chapter 32, and I've included a copy of this in your folder, which were approved on February 22nd of 2018, broaden the use of the sewer construction and private way maintenance and improvement fund to include monies for planning, design, and construction of sewers and other means of comprehensive wastewater management. Dredging projects that improve flushing, that reduce nutrient load to embayments are non-traditional alternatives. You heard a lot about this in the 208 plan. I think it opened the door for the regulators to begin to consider not just pipes and pumps, but also non-traditional approaches, whether it be dredging, and flushing, improved flushing. The dredging, remember, has to be correlated to an improvement. And you know, you have to be able to quantify that it does result in an improvement. And I included an older but still relevant study that was done on this specific location and the sorts of percentage removals you might see of nutrient load by dredging this specific cut. So it's a short read, but it's worth reading certainly, because when you start to talk about a $180+ million sewer alternative for this area, when you see percentages, even if they're single-digit percentages, 7 or 8%, those are significant dollars that might not have to go into sewering, and can also serve the dual purpose of helping us meet our dredge program and reduce nutrient load in those embayments by increase the flushing. The challenge we have there is the regulators really don't recognize that in a quantifiable way yet, but they are receptive to that now, and we are working with them on that. I think if we were going to move forward with a use of this fund, it would be wise if we were borrowing the money to get a determination from bond counsel that there weren't any issues with borrowing it. I think it would be, and I'd defer to Director Milne on this, but I believe if it's a cash appropriation, it might be a different question there. So just we want to make sure that if we decide to use this and borrow it, then that's something that we would probably reach out to our bond counsel ahead of time and say, here's what we intend to do, here's one of the funding sources, and we want to make sure that it's okay and we don't hit any problems when we borrow this. Right now that fund has $15 million in it, and it brings in about $2.4 million a year. To give you a bigger picture, I mean, we've got 5 embayment systems here. You're all familiar with them: Barnstable Harbor, Pompanesett, 3 Bays, Centerville River, and Lewis Bay. The project, and this was a result of the work of DPW and its comprehensive water management planning, and the RAC committee that you asked to come back to you with a recommendation relevant to how to proceed on our comprehensive water management planning. And you can see this, the red areas are recommended for nitrogen removal, certainly upgradient of 3 bays, that large red area is recommended. So as we go into looking at this first dredge project that we have before us, there's the 3 bay system. If you head over toward where it's blue and then green again is really the area that we're looking to dredge in the first phase of this project. So you can see that upgradient, we have excessive nutrient load. There's been a study from 2008 that shows that there is a projected reduction of nitrogen by doing this project, and so that this merits consideration, I believe, of that potential funding source. Now, quantifying this becomes a different challenge, and we need to be understanding of that going into it. These more innovative approaches, again, the regulators, it's just like aquaculture and some of the others, they don't necessarily, they're much more comfortable with the pipes and the pumps. This sort of non-traditional they're receptive to it, but cautious, relevant to it. So we need to remember that. Other potential funding sources, the CPA or CPC funds that are out there. There's three major categories. I know you're all familiar with this, but it's historic, open space and recreational, and housing. It's believed that under the open space well, it's not believed, it's an eligible expense for the creation of saltwater and freshwater marshes and other various types of wetlands. So therefore, a dredging project could be considered under CPC for funding. And so I intend to go into CPC the end of the month with our staff and discuss this program and discuss why we would like them to consider under the open space category a potential contribution toward appropriate projects for dredging. Not all will apply, because it starts getting pretty complicated depending on you got to get down to each project and look at the merits of it. But again, it's a potential funding source, given the magnitude of this, that we really need to look at. Grants. We applied for a $1 million Mass Works grant, Phase 1, for the Phase 1 Cotuit Cut on the August 3rd, or last Friday. That's been submitted, and that's a 50-50 match scenario. The match in this case was the permitting work, over $1 million worth of permitting work that the former Three Bays, now Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, did on that project. So it has been submitted, and we await acknowledgement of our status relevant to that. Now, certainly, it helps that we have a permitted project. It helps that we have the county dredge ready to go, and that's all been included in what we've communicated to the state. This is a new program that's out there that we applied for. We also received an earmark in the Economic Development Bond Bill. It's Bill 4868, and if you want a copy of it, I think it's 120 plus pages, but for $2 million. Now, when I started, I said this was a three-phase project, about $3 million. So we were fortunate to have the Mass Works come along. We had always been trying to work toward the $2 million to help us out here. So now there's $3 million. I'm not quite sure with the 50-50 match on the second two phases how that would, whether it would apply. It may not. There may not be a match requirement. It might be a straight $2 million there. So that would be helpful, that we were able to take the match from the outside nonprofit that did the permitting on the first phase, and then if we can just use this directly on the second two phases, that would make it a simpler decision. The language for the dredging appropriation in the Economic Development Bond Bill is not less than $2 million shall be expended for maintenance dredging of appropriate sediment in the town of Barnstable from the western end of Sampson's Island, with disposal occurring on the eastern end of Dead Neck. So basically, if I go back, that's taking this area out and moving it to the right in that picture. It is specific to that location. So it's not as though we know we have millions of dollars worth of dredge, and if another project were ready, that doesn't mean that that's transferable for use. So, but that's a that's a nice opportunity for us, as we discussed earlier, relevant to Bush Point and Commerce Road area. These are not authorized yet. This $2 million is not authorized yet. The Economic Development Bond Bill was approved. This is something that the governor would need to release. So we'll keep in constant communication and certainly work with our legislature, who has been extremely helpful on many fronts, and hopefully not only will we be successful with the Mass Works grant, but also the Economic Development Bond Bill. And then private contributions. After the last presentation, I received 2 calls from private marinas in town that said, please involve us. Even with funding, involve us. We don't know what we can do, but we want to. This is important to our livelihood. This is important to our residents and our visitors, and involve us. And so I said absolutely. And so there's nothing but positive that can come from that. And hopefully they'll help us think through these options and assist, when and where they can. So what I see is our action items here. So moving from the funding options to action items, certainly I want to receive feedback on the various funding mechanisms for DRED programs. At this point, I'm going to go out and say, I recommend we continue to consider all options, given the magnitude of this program, but certainly we know that we will refine this as we move forward and perhaps move in specific directions. And I actually think we'll move in specific. The reason I say look at all of them is because I think each project may have aspects that would merit one option over another. So I think it would be wise for us to put in place as broad an opportunity of funding mechanisms as we can, and then appropriately be able to move with a particular palette of options so that we can move in a timely manner and move forward with the project and not fall behind further, so that I'm telling you that we have a backlog of 10 years in 2 years from now. So, and then finally, appropriation, transfer, and loan order 2018-074 came up during our capital program. I had asked the council to consider moving it forward. They, did so, and that's up for August 16th for a second read. And so we would want to discuss how to proceed relevant to that. Are we ready to consider that, or do we need more time as we evaluate these potential funding options? And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the update. It's really a critical project. I know you and your team have put a lot of time into this. Any council questions? Councilor Flores?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good presentation, Mark. Just a few questions based on where the council has been in the past. We've had presentations by the county commissioners relative to the permitting process that's involved for doing dredging, that they wanted to handle that as a collective entity. Did anything ever happen with that? Because the permitting process is expensive and timely, and they were talking about expediting, if you will, that kind of a service for us. So I'm curious, did that ever go anywhere?
Not to my knowledge. I know that their efforts were focused on putting in place a second dredge.
Right.
I know that we had already had an appropriation to proceed with a master plan and a maintenance dredge permitting program. And I think that preceded that thought. So they may be actively working on it, but they haven't been coordinating with us on what they're doing Cape-wide, other than regular discussions about use of the county dredges.
Would we be using the county dredge for dredging within the town of Barnstable, or would we be looking at private dredging opportunities?
For the simple moving sand out of channels, we'd be looking at using the county dredges. When we get into the categories 2 and 3, where the materials get tougher, it's going to depend on the material. The county dredge is cost effective, and so it's always a primary consideration.
But you always have to be in the queue to access them sometimes.
That's correct.
You're always waiting, so we're never really sure. This is a pretty aggressive plan that you presented tonight. How do we know that the county dredge can accommodate our needs as we move this forward?
Well, if they can't, well, they've made the commitment that they will be, and it's why they committed to the additional equipment. But
Okay.
if we find that that is not the case, which we have experienced in the past, we could certainly move to other options relatively quickly. I mean, contracting is always an option. Contracting in a hurry is really never a good idea, because you pay a premium for that. It's better to have it planned out and go through, a more normal process. I think that if we truly see that we are backlogged because of county or contractor, we'll just look at we'll look more serious at for the category 1 dredges, we'll look more serious at doing it ourselves. I think we're gonna have to look at that for category 2 and 3, because bringing in outside contractors gets very costly. And it's just gonna depend on how quickly we get those permits and whether it makes sense to do or not. It's gonna really be running the numbers on that and see what makes the most sense.
And final question, as we look at the dredging in and of itself, you know, we've had a number of presentations by Vineyard Wind and others suggesting that, you know, when they lay their cable, which is, you know, basically, you know, anywhere from 2 to 6 feet below the seabed, that it's not going to disrupt any kind of environmental life that might exist. So I'm curious, as we dredge, do we take into account from any benthic kind of mapping that we were doing, at least or supposedly going to do in Barnstable Harbor and other parts of our coastline, to figure out what kind of sea life actually exists and what the topography is of that?
It's all
those
part of the
particular-
permitting.
It's all part of the permitting, okay.
You know, it's easier where it's been dredged before. Certainly a new dredge, which really this isn't, those are far and few between. But maintenance dredge areas, yeah, you still got to go out there and know what exists both in sediment and in life, and then you permit for whatever those conditions are. And that's why we see these very limited windows in many cases, because you may have a fish run of flounder during certain times of the year, therefore you can't be in there dredging.
Right.
So all of that is considered as we go, and that's why it gets to be such a complicated permitting process, because there's so many factors that weigh into how and when you can do this and then where you put it.
Which is why I initially asked, is the county doing anything along that line? Because supposedly the recommendation
No,
was
if
to
I
save
would,
us lots of money.
and I have had the discussion with Jack Units about this, so I apologize, but it hasn't been with the dredging, and that's kind of why I think it didn't register initially, but it has been about disposal sites, because those are such a difficult, especially in the category 2 and 3, those are so difficult that if there were a common area, all of us would benefit. And they were looking at that, and I haven't heard back, but I'll follow up with them.
And finally, the benthic mapping, are we still moving forward with that?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is, the benthic mapping is a program that the Friends of Barnstable Harbor are doing to understand Barnstable Harbor and what exists within Barnstable Harbor. And they've asked us to participate with them. I want to sit down with them. They've done the initial phase with their own funding. They want to continue that effort. I think we should sit down and talk about partnering and also bringing in outside agencies that offer grants in this area, so we can have, you know, a private match, a public match, and one of these outside agencies, and see what we can do financially. They did send me some dollars, and it's $250,000 range that they're looking for at this point. So I think that's the next step, for us all to get together, sit down, figure out how we can do this, and then be able to bring it back to our processes and understand how that might benefit us.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Rapcorsetti?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark, for this. This is a long time coming. As you said, this permitting process on this Katuah cut alone has taken over 6 years. And it certainly deferred maintenance with regard to this channel. So I'm very pleased too that the permit was appealed and that appeal was lost. The appeal, you know, was determined not to go forward. So I understand that Mass DEP has allowed the project to proceed, or in 30 days from when the initial ruling came, the final determination, and I hope that that's favorable. So we're clear to start on October 15th on that project. This is deferred maintenance with regards to this project, and this project has, or this site has considerably changed since it was first permitted, or the process begun. And I think Lindsay Council's in the audience. He can attest to the fact that he was head of 3 bays when this went forward, and that was, you know, over a half a decade ago. So we now have 2 points of that area, and one of those areas, or in between the 2 points of the cut, is now sediment that's questionable. We're not sure what that is. So is this considered a Category 1 site? Or is that going to have to be reevaluated? Is it more like a Category 2? Or we're going to be able to, I mean, you said we're going to be able to use the county dredge to pump the sand spoils east. Is that still going to be the case? Or
It's my understanding that yes, the county dredge would do this project.
do the
I don't know if it's a Category 1 or 2. You know, I'd have to defer to, I don't know if Lindsay even knows that. I think it's primarily 1, and we actually had moved it up because it was an outside effort going on within our program, so.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Council President Steinhilber. There's about 1,500 yards of fine-grained material on the far eastern edge of the dredge area, if you remember the map with the cross-hatching that Mark had up there. So that will have to be dealt with in the last phase, and that would need to be dewatered probably on Loop Beach and then trucked away.
so that'll be part of Phase 3.
Phase 3. But it's
Okay.
only a small amount. Originally, it was thought to be more, but as they did additional surveys, it's around 1,500 yards.
Okay, all right. And can we get the listing of all the 31 dredge sites, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. And I think it's behooves the town to keep the public completely informed going forward when you talk about increasing fees to shellfishing permits, moorings, and the such, that be a public process. And I think that some of that's beginning at the Waterways Committee level. I'm not sure where else it's going to, the discussions will take place, but it's necessary that the public be aware of this from the beginning.
Absolutely. And no process will be circumvented. In fact, I'm going out to meet with all the chairs of our committees. I think we used to do that. We certainly did it when we were doing wastewater planning, when we were doing water planning. I think this merits that same level of effort. So I'll be talking with them about all of those and any other issues. And just because we identify it doesn't mean that that's the route we'll go. But I think we also have to engage them in that process, whether it's waterways or shellfish or any of them.
Okay. The one last comment too, I had that you know, this process has taken so long. This permit took so long. Is this how long is this permit going to be good for? Are we going to be able to go back in 10 years?
5 years.
It's
3 years. Sorry, 3 years.
So it's a 3-year, and that's it. And then you have to reapply. But it's easier because you've done it once to go back to get a maintenance dredge permit subsequently?
That's the thought process. So this permit is for the 3 phases of the project that we're currently talking about, and it's for the next 3 years to execute that project. However, once you have dredged an area, yes, going back and getting additional permits is traditionally easier. In this case, as you know, there was appeal that was put onto it, and that's one of the things that dragged this out. And so that's the wild card going forward. But traditionally, once you've already done it, it's much easier to do it. If you look at our comprehensive permit that we're doing now, it's all in maintenance dredge areas with very few exceptions. And that is because it makes it much easier to get that comprehensive permit through.
So what if all of a sudden they can't dredge because of, you know, a flounder, school of flounder coming through, and they say, oh, nope, can't dredge. Can you extend the permit? Can you get...
You can go for a permit modification.
Okay.
However, it's pretty understood when flounder spawning is happening or not. That's why we have to be done. Generally, it's about mid-January. Sometimes you can stretch to the beginning of February. That's why you don't get in usually. And then you've got the horseshoe crabs in the summer. You've got the boating issues. So that's why we don't even get in until about October 1st. That window from October 1st to middle January is generally very safe for us. So as long as the county dredge is lined up, and in this case it is, and as long as we have our funding lined up, which we are currently discussing, we should be able to execute forward and get that stuff done.
Good. Thank you very much.
Councilor Bienbender?
Thank you. I have kind of 3 questions or requests. So time for establishing prioritization of the dredge sites, has that been done, or if not, what is the timeline? That's my first question. and that's related to what Councilor Rep Grissetti requested, which was the list. And I'm wondering if, when the list is sent to us, if that prioritization has been put in place, we can have a sense of, for each of those sites, where they fall in the prioritization. And then the third piece is in regard to funding for CPA, regarding open space and rec. It just mentions the creation of saltwater and freshwater marshes. Can you also use CPA funds if it's used recreational for boating, just for the sake of getting boats out to where they want to be, or is it specifically only to this particular piece?
I think it is limited.
Okay.
I think that across the state, they have used this type of funding to do project by project related to wetlands type projects. But in looking at them, they vary. So using CPC funds, I believe, is going to come back to the specific project that we're requesting and the merits related to eligibility. I don't know, and I'll defer to Lindsay. Certainly, he's here, and he's the chair of the CPC. But I don't know that that recreational component is where the eligibility falls. Okay, so Rob, I'll try to answer real quick. I think when you look at the priority, which we will provide you all the sites, they're really focused first on Category 1, then 2 and 3, primarily because of the permitting timelines associated with them, and also cost goes up, quite honestly. So we're going to, luckily there's fewer sites in those two categories. Rob can get into more detail there, and then I'll ask Lindsay to come up and share any insight he has on the CPC.
So to speak to the categorization, again, sorry, I didn't introduce myself the first time, Rob Steen, Department of Public Works. To speak to the categorization, what happened, the way the plan was created was, yes, there was a consultant involved, but there was also a committee from within town, staffed with members from MEA, DPW, et cetera. And what they looked at when they were looking at sort of the timelines for these things were Category 1, 2, 3, but they also looked at historically, how often does this become an issue and how much urgency is there to it? So for instance, if you go to the north side, you know the harbor entrance going in by Blish Point, that's about a once every 5-year recurrence interval for there. There's other areas on the 3 bays, if you go into the narrows of 3 bays, it hasn't been dredged in 45 years and still looks good. So that fed into what that initial timeline was for what went first, what went second, what went third. What we are now doing is we're going through and doing one last push through that to really look at that and say, okay, what other kind of shifting needs to happen to do 2 or 3 things? One is, if you look at it the way it currently stands, you have years where you have no funding and years where you have $3.9 million funding. And we want to try to level fund that a little bit more so that we can be more predictive to it. And then what are we learning as we go through this, and what are we starting to understand? Because all of this is based on what the past practices were, and are those still current and still valid as we use this going forward? Does that make sense? Cool.
Councilor Hebert?
Thank you, Mr. President.
I was going to answer the one.
Yeah, Lindsay, go ahead.
The one question on the creation of the water under the ocean, which is what the legal department has determined is the creation of open space. So it's a very interesting legal angle to look at the creation of these areas that the dredging, particularly in the Category 1 projects where the clean sand is being placed, is creation of open space. So that will actually open up the other areas and beaches in the area for this sand nourishment. Wouldn't be just dedicated to the Dead Neck area. So it's a very interesting proposal, and we're looking forward to hearing it in full at the CPC meeting on the 27th.
Thank you, Lindsay. Go ahead, Councilor Hebert.
Thank you. Just Mark or Mr. Stein, I was told that part of our problem, let's say at Sandy Neck, with losing sand was a result of partly the canal and how the jetty there or something created a situation where we lose sand as a result of the currents, how that goes. I don't know the truth of that or not, but I just throw that out. If that's the case, if anything like that is part of our looking for partners, whether the Army Corps of Engineers or anybody could be a partner in helping us in any small way. At this point, $250,000, $500,000 makes a difference. So I'm sure that you're on top of that more than I could ever imagine, but I just kind of throw it out, but
We-
thank
we-
you.
We ask any and all to participate. Truth is, it's a very dynamic environment out there. We certainly see it regularly on the north side, whether it be the residents that were here earlier or at Sandy Neck. But the south side is also very dynamic. It not only, and maybe a little more subtly, but well, not so much at the cut. That's changed dramatically. But when you get up into the bays and looking at the system as the sediment settles and changes the way that the environmental aspect of the system works, I think we need to be mindful of that. And there are partnerships to be had in that area as well as we go from the more technical, go out there and dredge it so the boats can get in and out. Now we're starting to look at and try to quantify, okay, and what other added value is there to habitat, to flushing of nutrients, et cetera. So, yeah. Yep.
Any other councilors? Vice President Crocker?
Thank you very much. Could I ask you to go to number 21, page 21 of your presentation for our map, please? 218074. As I recall, that had very distinct contributions to pay for the $1 million. And that has been postponed to have a discussion in August, but if everything I heard a little earlier tonight is really the question that needs to be resolved, I have terrible concerns that we may not have funding as fast as we may need funding for the October process. So if you would flip back to 14, please. Last bullet says it's recommended that if these funds are to be used for borrowing, determined from bond council. This is one of the funds that's supposed to pay for the 218 that's scheduled to come up for discussion. And yet we're talking about we might need to talk to somebody before we can talk about it being the appropriate fund. That's just crazy. We got to get back on track here.
Yep.
I mean, you can't be advancing. We know we've been waiting for the legal fight. We know we only have a small window because of different mammals that run through there, shellfish, everything runs through there. That's why you can have to stop your docks at a certain season. So we know how small the window is. We know we're working with the county. And now 2 of the 3 funds that were supposed to help pay for this come up tonight as questionable or needing some answers. So how do we focus on those 2 issues to make sure that we have a first read and a second read in the month of September so that we have money available, as we've all discussed tonight, for the October dig?
Well, we need to, in the case of the CPC, get a determination as to whether that will proceed for consideration.
Have we ordered that determination? Have we asked any professional outsider to give us a determination? How will you seek that determination?
On the sewer trust fund or on the CPC?
You have 2 of them that you said need determination now. How are you pursuing?
Our internal legal department looked at eligibility under CPC. Outside, Mark Milne would go to bond counsel and ask the question.
Have we
I don't believe
approached
we've
bond counsel?
asked. I mean, Mark can correct me, but, oh, here he comes.
President, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. For this particular project, I don't believe we can exclude bond counsel from consideration because the size of the project and the amount of funding that we have available in that trust fund, if we're going to use it, I would recommend a cash appropriation, no borrowing necessary. And so we can get the answer from bond counsel down the road in the future when the appropriate time comes that we need to do a borrowing from that fund. But for this project, it would be my recommendation that we do a cash appropriation due to the size of the money.
From this fund or from
this
the
fund.
general fund?
From this fund, if we deem it's an appropriate source to be used, then it would be cash and not a borrowing.
Do you find the problem that I'm feeling about that? One way you're telling me the fund may not be qualified to pay it if it was to borrow and make the borrowing payments, yet we're gonna advance cash out of that fund for the same purpose, and that's okay.
Yeah, when you look at the language that we passed in the home rule petition, I think it's very broad, and it allows us.
It was done intentionally, let's be
Intentionally,
honest.
it was good.
Okay.
And-
I was
and-
one of the sponsors, so I'm a little disappointed here tonight.
I think,
Go ahead.
and I think it provides us the opportunity to consider projects that offer the opportunity to improve the water quality.
Yes.
Like this project does.
Yes.
Then I believe we can make a good case to use this as from a cash appropriation,
Yes.
not involving bond council.
Sure.
We don't need to involve bond council.
Sure.
But I just want to make sure if we get to a project that requires a borrowing,
Right.
that we just run it by bond council to make sure that they're okay with that determination that we've made.
Right, well, let's look at the fund for one moment. We got 16 million in it, we know it brings in about 2.4 million a year. That leaves you with 13.6 a year. So we got 13.6 that we can burn off because really we can't use it for anything else. It's required specifically for that or for the sewer expansion. And then you're down to the income, and you would never use all of the income. You'd set aside a percentage as you always would. So if we're going to break it into that detail, do we need to have the consideration before we expend dime one? Are you?
No, I'm not,
You s-
I don't think we do.
Okay,
I don't
thank
think we
you.
do.
That's the biggest issue. Could I ask for a follow-up, though, and also ask that we move it up the ladder for the resolve on whether or not it's appropriate for borrowing? Because we may need to chase the special legislation again if it's not worded correctly for borrowing.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Any other counselors?
I need one more. We're not
Vice
quite
President, go
finished
ahead.
with the CPC one. So on the CPC one, we heard the chairman tell us that open space might be created by dredging, it might be created by adding soil up top. But we haven't had any of the discussion that, even though we're on Cape Cod, that it's a recreational use. Are we seeking opinions on that as well, so that we have two discussions, one about creating the space by the dredge spoils and/or enlarging these channels, and/or whether it just meets straight up as a recreational use?
We will seek. We have not gone to outside counsel at this point.
Okay, you've got a meeting coming up with CPC.
Yes.
And if I was them, I'd be pressing you on it.
Yes.
Are you gonna be able to have that resolved before you get there?
That would be my intent.
Beautiful, thank you very much.
And the original.
We obviously need to rewrite all this if we're going to
Correct.
be ready for October, if we're wrong.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you everyone for the presentation.
Thank you.
And that will end our meeting. The next regular meeting is August 16th, 2018. Do I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Have a good night, everyone.